Sometimes all you have is one day of travel, and when that happens, you really want to make the most of it. And that's what we were confronted, my family and myself. We had one full day in San Francisco, and we were going to see as much of this great city as we could. We flew out of Everett Payne Field in Washington, and a little over 2 hours later, we arrived in San Francisco, caught a cab, and headed to our hotel at Fisherman's Wharf. We stayed at the Fisherman's Wharf Marriott, a nice hotel, great location, and very friendly staff. We arrived mid-afternoon, so we checked in, grabbed a not-so-healthy snack and a coffee, and explored Fisherman's Wharf. A little later, we sat down for dinner at the nearby Boudin's. I don't know if I'm actually pronouncing that correctly, but nonetheless, this restaurant is a fun spot known for its bread, and the location and the view of Alcatraz was really spectacular. The next day, we woke early and headed to the Hollywood Cafe for breakfast. A corny name, but a great little place to eat, and it's very popular for a good reason. It's about a 5-minute walk from our hotel. After breakfast, we headed to the Big Bus, located at Fisherman's Wharf. If you book online, you can actually save a few dollars per ticket, and then be sure you show your online ticket to the staff, and they will give you a physical ticket. Whenever we travel to a larger city and have limited time, we do tend to gravitate to something like the Big Bus or hop-on, hop-off tour. It just makes getting around the big city so much easier. Well, our first stop was Chinatown. We've been here before and it was bustling then, but admittedly we were there really early this time and it was very quiet and many of the stores were actually closed. We walked through Chinatown, had a look around, bought a couple of smaller items, and then headed on our way. We chose to walk to our next destination instead of catching the big bus. This time, it was Union Square. Union Square is where all the fancy shopping is. And if you need a bathroom, it's on the 3rd floor of Macy's. So we wandered around Union Square, spent about an hour in the Apple store, bought nothing, and then left. We then continued our walking through to the Soma area, and for one reason only, to go to a coffee shop named Sight Glass. But we misjudged the distance, so it was a very long walk, and I have to tell you, it was through some pretty sketchy areas. I would recommend going if you're in the area, but if you have limited time and have to walk the great distance that we did, it probably isn't worth it. But I have to say, the coffee and the pastry, yep, they were pretty good. So from Sight Glass Coffee, we once again hit the road and walked to the Civic Center. We then joined the big bus tour again and caught the bus to the Alamo Square stop. A short walk later, we arrived at the Alamo Square Park and a view of the famous Painted Ladies. The view of the city in the distance is really quite stunning. And once again, if you're looking for a bathroom, there are public restrooms in the park. After a short stop, we then walked to Japantown. Honestly, I never even knew of this area, but my teenage son loves anime, so he'd researched a few stores in the area, so that's why we went. After we looked around a while, we went to Benihana's for lunch. Big mistake. The service was very poor, and the food, I have to say, was ordinary at best. We then caught the big bus again and took it to Golden Gate Park. This park is absolutely incredible. It's huge and reminds me of Central Park in New York and Stanley Park in Vancouver. But we were a little disappointed because we were there 2 days too early for the Ansel Adams exhibit at the De Young Museum. But to be honest, we actually came to visit the Japanese tea gardens. So, be warned, you actually have to pay to get into the individual gardens like the Japanese tea garden and the botanical gardens. And I wouldn't call the entry fee cheap, but I would say the gardens were magnificent. So here we slowed down a bit. We had some traditional tea and snacks, looked around, collected our zen, and then hopped back on the bus. The next stop was Golden Gate Bridge. As you can imagine, this is a very popular stop. Well, there isn't too much to do here but take in the magnificent view. After taking some photographs, we then hopped back on the next bus. One stop later was the Palace of Fine Arts. After a quick look around, we then hopped back on the bus and jumped back off at Lombard Street. After a very steep walk up, we arrived at the world-famous Lombard Street. This is such an iconic location, and it's fun to either drive or walk down this windy road. But be sure you take a few minutes to take in the views and, of course, catch your breath. Just a few blocks from Lombard Street was another coffee spot my wife had found called the Fiddly Fig. The place was really full, and for good reason. We grabbed a coffee and a sandwich because we didn't finish our lunch at Benihana's. After a needed break, we then headed back to the hotel and got ready for dinner. For dinner, we went to Barrio, which is about a 5-minute walk from our hotel. Barrio is a Mexican restaurant in the Ghirardelli complex. The restaurant has an amazing view of the harbor and Alcatraz, and the food and service, well, they were really good too. And to wrap up the day, we shared some sundaes at Ghirardelli's. A great day with lots of walking. Now, admittedly, we ran out of time. We did not have time to go and see Alcatraz, but we have been there before, and if you do have a chance and do have the time, it's highly recommended. It really is a great tour. So, there you go, our 24 hours in the beautiful city of San Francisco.